Great visit with Mike Gundy of Oklahoma State. And in leading up to and preparing for our conversation with Mike Gundy, kind of stumbled across a couple of trends. And there were a number of teams that have not won their conference in a really long time, but man, this could be the year. I look at Oklahoma State in particular. I think Oklahoma State, on paper, have as many answers as anyone in the entire Big 12. Now, there will be a faction of people that will be very supportive of Utah coming right into the league and ascending to the top, perhaps. Maybe Kansas State with Avery Johnson, an offense that has a lot of weapons. Maybe they're the group that might ascend, and especially knowing how they play at all three levels defensively. You look, maybe can TCU get back to the forefront? Of course, missed out on winning the conference title a couple years ago, but ultimately still got to the playoff and ultimately found themselves in the national championship game. So we started kind of diving down to the list a little bit. And we looked at it. Oklahoma State hasn't won a conference title since 2011. I think this could be the year. Not only do I think this could be the year, I think this will be the year. I'm not going to make a hold me to it, feet to the fire selection just yet on who's going to win the Big 12. But right now, if I had to pick, I'm going with the Pokes, knowing what they bring back offensively and the style that they're going to play defensively. Being in year two, I just expect significant growth on that side of the ball. I look back to other teams of significance that have had really long layoffs since their last conference championship. The Miami Hurricanes. They have not won a conference title since 2003. That was in the Big East. It's been quite a while since they've even been in the Big East, let alone having won an ACC title. When they got to the ACC, people were saying, oh my goodness, Miami, they're just going to run away with it every year. It'll be Miami and Florida State every year for the ACC title game. That never materialized. But if you look at what they have on paper this year, granted, I love Florida State, I love Clemson, but I also love Miami. This could definitely be the year that long drought without a conference title comes to an end. How about this one? This is a really long drought, so bear with me. 61 years. 61 years since the Ole Miss Rebels have won a conference championship. 1963 was their last SEC crown. And if you look at what the Rebels have, now depth, if you want to have question marks about their depth, if you want to have question marks about the potential of an up and down performance, fair enough. I have those question marks. But if you look at just known commodities across the board and the influx of talent that Lane Kiffin has had in the transfer portal, adding pivotal difference makers on the defensive front in Princely Umanmielen and Walter Nolan, adding Trey Amos in the secondary, adding quality depth at linebacker, adding quality depth to their receiver core that didn't need help by adding Juice Wells from South Carolina. Could this be the year that Ole Miss wins the conference crown for the first time since the mid-1960s? I think it very well could come to fruition. It could, especially when you look at their schedule and how things potentially settle out. NC State in the ACC. We've already referenced Miami. We already talked about how much we love Clemson. We already talked about how much we love the Miami Hurricanes. We love those teams. Okay, FSU, Miami, and Clemson, I think they're the top three teams in the ACC. And then I do think there is a little bit of a gap. But that gap just behind those three might be as dangerous as you'll find depending on how things might work out. And NC State is very much in that grouping. Maybe they're at the top end of that grouping. Maybe they're at the bottom end of that grouping. But there's 4 or 5 teams that I think could rally up and allow the stars to align that could potentially find themselves in the conference title game. And then in a one-game season, maybe they find their way to the college football playoff by winning the ACC. They have not won their conference since 1979. So it's been a really long time as well for the NC State Wolfpack, and maybe they can get it done. How about Missouri? Missouri has not won a conference championship. Now, they've been to the SEC championship multiple times in the last decade and change, but they haven't been able to actually win those SEC championship game appearances. This could be the year. They bring back the best wide receiver in the sport in Luther Burton. They bring back their quarterback in Brady Cook. They have a really solid contingent of offensive linemen. I think there are some massive gaps in the defense, potentially big voids that need to be filled, like Darius Robinson, Chris Abrams-Drain, their corners. They were amazing there in the back end defensively, and really at all three levels defensively. They also had to replace their defensive coordinator, but they haven't won a conference championship since 1969. That was in the Big Eight. Can Missouri potentially get it done this year? That is a real question mark. And hey, if you look at their schedule, there's certainly a possibility, if not a probability, this team reaches double-digit wins in the regular season. You look at Arizona. They have not won a conference championship since 1993. That was back not just in the Pac-12, that was in the Pac-10. So it's been a while since Arizona has won the Pac-10. They're not in the Pac-10 anymore. They're now in the Big 12. But with what they bring back, new coaching staff, Brent Brennan being there as well, I think the Big 12 is wide open. The gap between Team 1 and Team 14 or 15 or 16, however many are in it, I think it's 16. The gap between 1 and 16 to me feels more narrow than any other conference. Partly because I don't know who's won. I think it's Oklahoma State, but you can make a strong case for Kansas State. You can make a strong case for Arizona. You can make a strong case for Utah. You can make a strong case for all these teams. I don't know exactly how the Pac-12 is going to kind of shake itself out. They have 8 new members in the last couple of years. But could Arizona potentially ascend to the top of a conference that is very, very new and find themselves in the driver's seat potentially with what they bring back at quarterback and Noah Fafita, what they bring back at wide receiver and Tetra Noah McMillan? They're really good at their skill positions. They were rock solid in the front defensively last year. So if what Mike Gundy says comes true and it becomes a line of scrimmage league, maybe Arizona can cause some problems for a lot of folks. Virginia Tech hasn't won their conference since 2010. They have a lot of pieces back and a team that I think has a lot of upside, even though some of the consistency might be a challenge in a grouping that includes NC State, like we mentioned earlier. I think that is a Virginia Tech team that's very dangerous. Very dangerous. I don't know if they quite have the pieces yet to win the conference, but they are extremely dangerous, and they would not be a team I'd want to play on a regular basis. Tennessee has not won the SEC since 1998. It's been a quarter century since the Tennessee Volunteers were named the SEC champions. Maybe this is the year. We've talked already about what they have defensively. We know they have an elite edge defender. We know they have a really good contingent of defensive linemen. We know they're rock solid on offense with their weapons on the perimeter, but it's the quarterback position. Nico Iamaleava. He's the guy. If he's as advertised, they could certainly elevate to the top of the Southeastern Conference. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. It's going to be insanely difficult, but who's to say they can't? You know, remember last year and the year before that, not a lot of people were talking about Tennessee. More people were talking about them last year than the year before. But now I feel like Tennessee's in a really good spot, kind of flying under the radar a little bit, but with a lot of upside, in large part due to the talent that they have at the quarterback position. So Tennessee, can they bring home their first title since 1998? The Kansas Jayhawks, they have a great quarterback. They have a really good speed on the perimeter. They have an elite running back, and they have a fairly disruptive defense. They haven't won a conference championship since 1968. That was back in the Big 8 era. I've already talked about the Big 12. It's wide open, man. There's 5 or 6 teams at the top that I think could absolutely win the league. And I would include Kansas in that conversation exclusively because Jalen Daniels is now back at quarterback. If he could stay healthy, they're 8-2 when he started games in the last couple of years. I mean, he's the real deal, but being available is of the utmost importance. And if he is, Kansas becomes an immediate problem for every single person on their schedule. And then finally, last but not least, the Louisville Cardinals played for the ACC championship last year. They've had to plug and play a lot of pieces via the portal. Will they have enough to ascend back up? I don't know. But much like we talked about with Virginia Tech, much like we talked about with NC State, I think the big three are established there in the ACC right now. But that next collection of teams, if the stars can align, can they be dangerous enough to upset a few teams along the way, find their way in the conference title game, then ultimately win that one-game championship for a place in the college football playoff? Louisville can certainly be there, and it would end a drought since 2012 since they've won the ACC. Of course, at that point, it was the Big East.